There was a time when women were unable to voice an opinion, being unable to cast a vote, or even being forced to get married to someone they did not approve of. Fortunately, such long-standing problems have largely been overcome, with women gaining a lot of ground in politics, decision-making, and the workforce. However, some aspects of women's life have not seen such progress in certain corners of the globe. In this video, I specifically want to talk about how Fethullah Gulen perceives women. It'll be interesting. Stay tuned. Being virtually unknown in America despite his residency in rural Pennsylvania since 1999, and with the worth of $25 billion, Fethullah Gulen is often praised by the mainstream media for quote-unquote advocating peace, education, and democracy. And of course, his movement, Hizmet, also gets his share from those generous compliments for similar reasons. However, just as his long-running goal of gaining power by infiltrating state institutions in Turkey goes largely unnoticed in the mainstream media, so too does Fethullah Gulen's perspective on women. In fact, Gulen has used his female followers as a stepping stool in order to empower himself and his movement. How? Let me explain. As an imam with intensive Islamic knowledge and influential rhetoric, Gulen started his activities in Turkey by establishing underground networks due to the pressure exerted by the secular Turkish state on religious sects in the 1970s. He was chiefly a nationalist and radical for many. The state was both his nemesis and ultimate obsession. Therefore, he started to place his followers in critical positions in the government in order to ward off reprisals from authorities and eventually seize the government. But all of his followers in those critical positions were male, not because he didn't have any female followers, but because of his belief that women are not capable of fulfilling those critical missions. In fact, Gulen had extreme regulations for his female followers, as he forbid them from showing their hands, faces, or even eyebrows. And they were required to wear gloves and glasses so that their hands and eyebrows could not be seen. Moreover, Gulen fiercely opposed the idea of sending girls to even elementary school, arguing that the actual mission of women is quote-unquote giving birth to contemporary companions, referring to companions of Prophet Muhammad. In an effort to defend his argument that girls should not be sent to school, Gulen, in his another sermon, drew an analogy saying that the mother of Mehmet the Conqueror, a well-known Ottoman sultan who conquered Istanbul, wasn't a college graduate. Acknowledging his views, female followers began to fulfill their assigned duties. In other words, women took the backseat in the movement, while men were able to advance through Gulen's inner circle. Meanwhile, Gulen himself did not even want to associate with women, let alone accept their presence. However, his views started to change after seeing women around then Prime Minister Necmettin Erbakan. Erbakan was known with his conservative political views, which often conflicted with the secularist ideals in Turkey. Contrary to his previous argument about the role of women, Gulen this time started urging his female followers to go to high school or even universities. So, as part of his new and unexpected directive, Gulen's movement started providing housing to the female students by renting apartments in various cities, which was something they had already done for male students a long time ago. These female students, who started their education in religious high school in the beginning, were later directed to law and education faculties by the very same men who once argued that they should not attend the school at all. So, there had to be an answer for this enormous change in Gulen's perspective towards women, and I'm almost certain that if he had a chance to ask this to Gulen himself, his response would be, well, people can defend some ideas that they can later reject at some point in their lives. But was it only about an idea that he could later reject? Or was it a calculated step that he took for the sake of his future plans? The only way to find the truth was to understand the role these female students later played in the Gulen's movement. But before I forget, Let me give you a footnote here which is quite remarkable. On February 28, 1997, some secular Turkish military officials staged a coup in Turkey, also known as the postmodern coup. Their intervention imposed intense pressure on religious groups in the country and led conservative Prime Minister Necmettin Erbakan to resign. At the moment, Gulen made another unexpected move by urging his female followers to remove their headscarves. Yeah, the same guy who once ordered his female followers to cover their hands and eyebrows, let alone their hair and faces. Back to our topic, the role Gulen designed for women in the movement began to take shape following the postmodern coup. But not only female students, but also the spouses of male followers who landed on critical positions in the government thanks to Gulen removed their headscarf. He further warned his single male followers in similar positions not to marry women with headscarf. Yeah, and if you think this is a little fishy, I say hold your horses. Because even marriages were arranged by the decision mechanism in the movement. So, if a female follower reaches the required age to get married, she would have to tell her counselor, who is basically a senior female member responsible for her.
Please, have a seat.
Future husbands were picked from a catalog with pictures of available male members in the movement. So, if she wasn't satisfied with what's in the catalog, her counselor would simply pick one whom she believed was the right choice for the bride-to-be without her consent. Objection? It means treason in the circle. The main idea of this practice was to increase the dependency of these female followers on the network. So, if a member ever wished to quit the organization, her husband and children were simply instructed to distance themselves from her, as there are many available examples of this. On the other hand, after gathering bride and groom for the first time, the couples were being told that Gulen was aware of this marriage and he expects self-sacrifice from them, adding that they may have problem in their marital life, but they would get eternal happiness hereafter in return. But as in all areas of the group, the women's branch consisted of 4 different categories. These female followers worked in those categories chosen for them after an extensive behavioral assessment previously made by their counselors. So, what are those categories and what are they for? As it is the lowest level among others, women in this category were responsible for organizing fundraising events to raise money for the group, providing accommodation for the new girls, and running errands for the upper level. The second category consisted of female followers who were school teachers from kindergarten to high school. This category is also divided into 2 subcategories, such as those working in the Gulen-affiliated schools and those working directly in the state schools. Their main task was to recruit new female students for the group. Third category. As the backbone of the women branch, the third category consisted of women who had direct contact with the decision makers in the group. The counselors I mentioned earlier were also among these women. This category was also divided into 2 subcategories, such as women responsible for urban operations and women responsible for recruiting high-profile females who had no affiliation with the group. Fourth category. The fourth category was the most crucial segment for the group, as it is the last and highest level that women followers can achieve. Although the number of women in the fourth category was far fewer than those in the first 3 categories, they had much more power and influence in the group. These women were not accountable to anyone other than a handful of people directly associated with Fethullah Gulen. Their main task was to ingratiate themselves with female spouses of senior state officials such as army generals, Supreme Court members, mayors, politicians, and others who had no affiliation with the group. The main purpose was to gather as much intelligence as possible about these individuals in order to minimize the possible reprisals by gaining information that could be used to blackmail them. But how did they manage to get through to the spouses of these high-profile individuals? Simple. By marrying high-profile male followers who maintained similar positions with the government. Now, Can you see the reason why I said Gulen has used his female followers as a stepping stool? As a matter of fact, every sharp turn he made in time towards women was simply a part of his plan of expansion rather than empowering them. He had absolutely no intention of helping women to participate in social life or encouraging them to become independent, in sharp contrast to those books where his perspective on women falsely portrayed in a positive manner. So, why isn't there a single woman among senior staff of Gulen while him and his group are constantly promoted as a modern and democratic? And let me ask you one last question. How do you think he feels about those women who are now locked up in Turkey for blindly carrying out his orders to seize the government as it's been his ultimate goal? Well, isn't it obvious?
Until we reach our final goal, every way and every method that takes us to the goal is legitimate. That includes lying and deceiving. I tell our friends that we might spend thousands and get only one back in return. What is important is to win the case. You will hire lawyers as well as judges.